We thank you again for joining us today, wherever you are, however you're with us, whether you're with us in real time or watching a delay on the YouTube. Doesn't matter. There's no time, there's no space in the divine. There just is. This morning we want to discuss some very simple ideas, but they are so simple that they may get by us. You know, we may think, well, that's just so obvious, that we don't go deep enough with them. And what we really want to take away, hopefully what we take away from this time that we spend together today, is our dedication to taking the time, our dedication to doing the practice, as I talked a couple weeks ago, theory, practice, consistency, to find the practice that works for us so that we can experience what we're talking about, not just hear the words, not just understand the syllables, not just form mental images of what it might be like, but to have an actual experience, an actual knowing. So the ideas that we're talking about today is very simple title, and it comes from Osho's Book of Wisdom. And this book by Osho is his discourses on the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. And the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali is a very old Indian text, and it's basically 112 or 113 different meditation techniques. And the idea is that somewhere in this list of 112 or 113 different techniques, there's bound to be one. There's bound to be one that's easy or fun, exciting for you, and you will stay with that one. And that's a good place to start. It's a good place to start. When Osho came along centuries later, and he did a series of talks in which he addressed each of these 112, 113 techniques. And he kind of grouped them together. You know, 3 or 4 might be for one purpose, another 3 or 4 for another. And the 4 he's talking about today are for the purpose of turning inward toward the real. And while that's easy to say, the implications are vast if we would take the time to just sit and think about them. If that which is real is to be discovered by turning inward, then what do we discover by turning outward? And what are we talking about turning? Are we talking about physically turning? You know, is there a way to, years ago when I started to read things like this, you know, I was wondering if they were talking about somehow physically turning the eyeballs in meditation. Were they flipping their eyeballs around, and were they looking within? And what do we mean by turning? What is it that we are turning? And where is inward? You know, is it into the center of our bodies? Is it a center someplace else? I'm reminded in New Testament, you know, in the New Testament when Jesus was telling people how to make their approach to God, how to have their experience of God, he said to go within, seek the kingdom within. Go within to your prayer closet and close the door. Go to a quiet place. Shut out the outward. Go within. And where is this within? Can we find that which is real without any externals? Or can we only find it within? You can see then that the very simple title, the simplicity of it can escape us. The depth of what it brings us to, if we will just stay with it for a little while, is enormous. So we want to start with kind of what is this journey that we as beings, what is this journey that we are on? Because it seems that we are seeking, and we're always seeking, we're always looking. And why are we always looking, and what are we looking for, you know? Seems like we are are programmed to seek. There was a book, I didn't read the book, I just know the title. There was a book written years ago, I think it was called Wired for God, and it was talking about how the author was saying the human brain is wired to cause us to look for God. And I don't know whether it was a religious book or whether it was a materialistic book, I don't know, but I just remember the title. And the idea is it seems to me that there's something within us that is destined to seek. It is of our nature to seek. It is of our nature that we're born looking for something, and we don't necessarily know what it is that we're looking for. We don't know why we're looking, but our life seems to be a journey of discovery, of trying to find this something, whatever this something is. And theologians would speculate and say, well, what that is that is the very love of God that is causing us to seek it, calling us home, if you want to think of it in those terms of old-time religion, you know, calling us back to itself. Somehow we are off wandering, and we know there's something else, and we're looking for it. And we don't know exactly where to look, and we don't know exactly how to look. But there's that within us which guarantees that we will find it. Right? It would not have put the desire to seek in our hearts if it was not possible to find it. God does not mock itself. Nature does not mock its children, the philosophers would tell us. And Augustine says that we would not even have the desire to pray if God had not first put it in our hearts. They're all kind of saying the same thing, you know, that there's something within us that is born to seek. And then that raises even deeper questions. Well, why do we feel that we don't have it now? Why do we feel that it is someplace else? Whatever this thing is that we're looking for. So this seems to be kind of the paradox of life itself. And religions and philosophies kind of emerge to provide explanations and to provide directions, to provide paths. And so, well, if you follow this path, you get back to what you're looking for. If you follow that path, you get back to what you're looking for. And then we get caught up in arguing about the path, you know. We want to know all that there is to know about the path. What kind of surface is it? You know, is it gravel? Is it mulch? Is it steep? How long does it take? Will I get tired on the way? Do they have places to rest? You know, maybe little, like the Appalachian Trail. Maybe they've got little lean-tos here and there where you can roll out your sleeping bag. We don't take the path. We want to know about the path. Then we argue whose path is right, which path is better than the other. And of course, while we're doing all that, we're not traveling the path. We're doing everything but traveling the path. And of course, at some point we might kind of realize that there are many paths, and they're all leading to the same place. They're all leading to the same place. There's no sense arguing or convincing or converting or all those kind of things. We have to find our path and take it. We have to allow others the same freedom to find their path and take it. But again, where is this path going? Why are we not already there? What is this thing called life? So kind of trying to ask and answer these questions and find ways that we can actually experience, not just know about, but to experience that which is real, that which is permanent. See, that seems to be what our path is. That seems to be what we're looking for. We're looking for that which is real or that which is permanent. And the whole question of what is real and what is not real then opens up another can of worms. You know, what is reality? When we talk about physics, in Newtonian physics, we learned protons, neutrons, and electrons, and now you get into quantum mechanics and you learn that, well, those things that you thought were there are only mostly there. Sometimes they're there and sometimes they're not there. And if you're looking for them to be there, they'll be there, but if you're not looking for them to be there, they may or they may not be there. And you say, well, what is real? What is real? I'm sitting in a chair. Is the chair real? Or is the chair here sometimes and not sometimes, or is part of the chair here? So, you can kind of almost go insane trying to figure it all out. So the best explanation I can give for today, or the best idea that I can give for today, is that when we're discussing today, just for today, when we're discussing that which is real, we're talking about that which is permanent, that which is. The is-ness, as I said in the opening treatment, the such-ness, the Am-ness. That's what is real. And everything else is impermanent. It is changing. It is in a flux-like state. It may be, or it may not be, or it is now, and in a little while it is not, and it is coming, and it is going. And all of these things that are changing, they are what we see in the external world, But that which is permanent, that which is real, that which is unchanging, well, that is the observer. So that which is observed is changing. And that which is observing is part of that which does not change. So think about it. You probably have childhood memories. I don't know how far back you can go in your childhood memories, but as far back as you can go in your memory and remember being a child, you remember what your body was like, you remember what your environment was like, you remember what the people around you were like. And all of that is gone. All of that is gone. The little body that you had as a child is gone, completely gone. Every cell is gone. Turned to dust, gone. The buildings that you were in as a child are either gone or they have changed. The people that you were with at the time, they too are gone or they have changed. Nothing is the same. It has all changed. It is all impermanent. It is not real. It has no power to sustain itself. It is the impermanence. In some of the Buddhist traditions in the countries where the funeral practices are cremation, and they have big burning grounds where they have these huge fires, and people bring the bodies of the deceased friends and relatives to the burning grounds, and the bodies are placed on a big stack of wood, and they're burned, and it's done in the open, and people can watch it. And in some of the Buddhist practices, they have the monks go and sit there at the burning ground for days, for weeks, for months, but to just go sit there at the burning ground and watch these corpses turn to ash, turn to dust. And the reason they do that is to help the monks, to help the students to really, really understand the impermanence of this life that we're living here. The situations, the circumstances that we find ourselves in. And yet there is something that is not changed. There is something that is not affected by the circumstances. There's something that just is, and that is life itself. Very life itself. So when you were a little child, you can remember being a little child because you were the observer. You were the observer. What is real is the observer. What is impermanent is the observer. And even though everything that existed at that time is no longer the way it was, including the body that you had, including the consciousness that you had, there is a memory there because the observer, the one observing, is the same. So we want to think of, first of all, we talked last week, about different opinions, how the four men in the elephant each had a different opinion as to what the elephant was like. One had the leg and said it was like a tree, and one had the tail and said it was like a rope, and one had the trunk and said it was like a big snake. One was pushing on the side and said it was like a wall. And we have to remember that the elephant was totally unaffected by this. The elephant just is. The elephant is the elephant is the elephant. And all of these opinions about it, what it's like and what it's not like, they're not real. They're only ideas. They're only opinions. So what we have to come to realize then about ourselves is that our consciousness, our human consciousness, is filled with ideas and with opinions that divide, that separate things, that classify things as this, that, or the other. And yet what the thing actually is not any of those ideas. None of those ideas. They are not real. They are opinions. They are impermanent. They are changing. So I've mentioned the Belgian artist who drew a painting of a tobacco pipe. And it's one of these pipes with a curved stem, kind of like a Sherlock Holmes pipe. And in French, underneath, there are words that say this is not a pipe. I think the painting is called The Treachery of Images. This is not a pipe. And you look at that and say, well, of course it's a pipe. It's got a curved stem, it's got a bowl, it's got tobacco, it's a pipe. But it's not a pipe. It's an image. It's an image of a pipe. And what we do in our lives is we confuse our opinions and we confuse our images with the reality of the thing itself. It seems to be the nature of our intellect to want to name things and identify things and label things. But we have to keep in mind that those are only ideas. Those are only ideas, and they are subject to change. They are not the thing itself. They are ideas of those things. So our spiritual path then, our spiritual growth, is to move beyond those ideas, to move away, let's say away from those ideas, if there's such a thing as direction, to move away from those ideas and move toward or turn toward the ultimate reality by whatever name we choose to call that. We can call it God, we can call it life, we can call it love. As I said last week, the 7 main aspects of God are just terms that we use to describe the ineffable. And in India, some of the prayers start with, "O ineffable one, O ineffable one," which is, again, just an idea. We don't know what ineffable is. We can't describe what ineffable is, but we can experience what ineffable is. We can experience that which we cannot describe. We can experience that which is before words, but from which words come. These are the mystical experiences, or the experiences of cosmic consciousness, or sometimes they're called peak experiences. But these are experiences that we have that let us know there's another something, another reality. In Plato's Republic, he talks about the people in the cave who saw the shadows on the wall of the cave and thought they were real people, because they didn't know any different. Right? So we have that experience where for a moment we slip outside the cave and we experience something totally different, totally different. So if we think about the different religious traditions, they're kind of like medicine. They're kind of like medicine that is for the purpose of making us whole. And by making us whole, it means to allow us to experience that oneness again, that oneness from which we came, that oneness from which we return. And the only way that we can return is with our consciousness. Right? We can do something. We can direct our attention. We can direct our consciousness. We can decide what we will think about or not think about. And if we can't, we can learn how to do that. That is part of what meditation is for. It teaches us how to detach from the thoughts. We spend most of our life caught up in the misunderstanding that we are our thoughts. And we're not. We are the observer of the thoughts. And through practice, we can experience the observer. We can experience that. The observer, the impermanence within us, that which is real within us. So if we go to the book of Genesis and kind of take this story of Adam and Eve in the garden, and we take that as kind of a metaphor, kind of for the human experience. There's a time where Adam and Eve were one with God. They experienced God. They walked in the cool of the evening with God, see. But then they did something. They ate from the tree of the knowledge, the idea, the mental image, the knowledge of good and evil. It doesn't say good and evil are real or permanent, but it says that they experienced the knowledge of good and evil. And that got them out of the garden. Now, in some teachings it would say, well, being put out of the garden was an act of punishment because they disobeyed. Another idea is, well, no, it's a metaphor, and what keeps us from experiencing the presence of God is that we were caught up in the ideas of separation. And yet another school of thought says, well, no, we as spiritual beings have deliberately decided to enter into this world, into this experience where we can have the experience of good or the experience the knowledge of good and the knowledge of evil, so that we can then find our way back home. No matter how we look at it, it is this return back to the garden, to the tree of life. There were two trees there. There's a tree of life. Life is permanent. Life is real. And you have the tree of the knowledge of good and the knowledge of evil, which are ideas. So when I look at that, I say, what it's kind of illustrating to me is that it is our mental activity of weighing and of analyzing and of dividing and of looking at things and labeling things and naming things, and this is good and this is bad, and all these things that we spend so much time doing that keeps us from experiencing the life within. So again, if you go back to the book of Genesis, we have a wonderful visual image there of God taking the clay and forming the clay of the earth into a human being, and then breathing life into the nostrils. Now the name Adam, my understanding, it means clay man or earth man, and that refers to that. God took the clay, and then you got the rock and roll song, he took 100 pounds of clay. So God takes the clay and breathes life into it. So what is real? What is permanent? Is it the clay, or is it the life that was breathed into it? And it is this life itself that is. And it is not a life that is separate and apart from and different than. It is the very life of the divine that animates the human. So we have grown up in an environment and in a society that is just overly focused on division, overly focused on naming and identifying and labeling, and we have even been divided against ourselves. Our Western culture lies so heavily on materialism, that which can be weighed and can be measured and can be touched. And those are the things that are real and are valuable and are important. And the intangible things, not so much. So even if you look at our societies, where we are, and you look at what's valued the most, it seems to be things that can be counted. How much money people have, how big their cars are, those kind of things. And yet the intangible things, such as the quality of life and happiness in our society, doesn't seem to have as much value, So you'll hear people say, well, what kind of job do you have and how much do you make, But rarely do you hear people say, well, how happy are you at what you do? As if that's not important, Nobody asked you if you wanted to be happy. They asked you how much money you wanted to make. So we kind of get so caught up in this this material idea that we actually believe that the mind, that the activity of the mind is who and what we are. We think that we are a mind, a thinking center, with a body. We're separated even from our own bodies, right? And again, this carries over into religion that tells us, well, you can't trust your body because of the original sin and because of the fall of Adam and because of all of these things. You can't even trust yourself. You can't listen in meditation for the voice of God because it may be the voice of something else. As if, we can't tell the difference between when we are imagining something and when we are experiencing something. So this return to wholeness then, this return to realness, this return to life is a turning inward. And by that we mean turning away from all of the opinions and all of the externals and all of the labels and all of the division, and turning back to that which is real, which is life itself. To experience life itself. So in Buddhism, we might be breaking out of the wheel of life, which is the wheel of the externals, which is the wheel of karma, which is the wheel of opinions and the suffering of the world and all of those things. And we reach this thing called enlightenment. In other traditions, we might be returning to the garden, to the tree of life, or we may be having the revelation of the Christ, the presence of life within us, the presence of God's life within us, and that takes us out of the world of suffering, out of the world of illusions. No, we have to remember the difference between knowing about it and knowing it. So it's easy to say, well, yeah, what we're really trying to do is we're trying to get rid of all of these ideas of separation, and our intellect is constantly separating and dividing everything. And our ego is constantly struggling against things, and this is why religious teachings will tell us that they have to be transcended. We can't struggle against them, we have to transcend them. But we need to experience it. We need to experience it. We don't want to know about the honey, we want to taste its sweetness. We want to experience it. So here's a couple of things, a couple of techniques to try. Remember what it is that we are doing is we are taking a vacation from the activity of the consciousness, the human consciousness, that is completely caught up into a world of make-believe in that it's only opinions, it's only ideas. The entire world that we live in is a projection of human ideas. The TV shows we see, the speeches by our politicians, the editorials in the newspaper, these are all just projections of ideas. And people are getting caught up and they're saying, well, yeah, these ideas are right and those ideas are wrong, and I'm gonna go with these ideas and I'm gonna reject those ideas, and they are all equally only ideas. And we want to take a vacation from that. We want to take a break from that, and we want to turn to that which is real. So technique number 1 is something that you will recognize as mindfulness. Can you be here now? Can you be here in the moment now? Can you identify with and associate with the observer? Don't get caught up in the thoughts. Don't get caught up in the appearances. Just be fully present in the moment with whatever it is that you are doing in the moment. And in our busy world, this is kind of a big one, because we're always multitasking. We're eating, but we're reading the paper. We're eating, and we're watching TV, or we're driving and we're listening to the radio, and we're never just being fully in the moment. Just be here now. Just be here now. Fully aware. Fully aware. Aware of the sights, but not labeling them, just aware of them. Aware of the sounds, aware of the smells. Aware of the sensation. Even aware of the thoughts that are passing through. But we're not hung up on any one of them. We're not stuck. We're just being here in the moment. When we had the center in Wilmington, one of the meditations that we used to do as part of the classwork, and people loved it, was bread meditation. We would go over to Apple Annie's and we would get 1 or 2 loaves of fresh baked bread over there, and then bring it to the class and just ask people to take a piece of bread and to put the bread into their mouth and to experience the bread. To experience it as the texture changes, as it starts to dissolve and it goes from crunchy to soft and then almost to liquid. To experience the flavors as the flavors seem to change. To experience the feel as you swallow it and it goes down your esophagus. And the point of the meditation is that you and I can bring our awareness. We have that choice. We don't always exercise it, and frequently we don't, but we have that choice to be in the moment. Just to be here now. Just to experience whatever it is that we are experiencing. The second thing that we can do is, and this is an interesting one, and these are from the Yoga Sutras. These are 4 of the Yoga Sutras. The second thing that we can do is whenever we feel satisfied, we can go in and actualize is the word that's used. We can become one with the satisfaction. Now this is really interesting. This is an interesting one to me for a couple of reasons, because most of the time we are focused on our dissatisfaction. We spend hours and hours and hours talking about the things that we don't like, or identifying with the aches and pains in our body. Oh, my aching back, or things like that. we start to get hungry, and hunger is arising. And we get to the point where it's almost as if we become the hunger, That's consumed us. All we can think about is eating or thirst and drinking. But when we eat or we drink, we don't savor the moment of satisfaction. We eat or drink to satiate the hunger or the thirst. But we don't take time to savor the moment. So when you are doing anything that is satisfying, even if you have an itch and you're going to scratch it, take time to be aware of and to experience that moment of satisfaction. Be present in it. Be fully aware of it. And this goes back to what I was talking about a couple of weeks ago about gratitude as a spiritual practice. Can we see the good in everything and everyone? Can we experience the good in everything and everyone? Can we bless everything and everyone? And by that I mean recognizing and experiencing the presence of God in it. We focus so much on getting that when we get, we don't pay attention to what it feels like. Our mind is already off to the next thing that we want to get. Be in the moment. Be especially in the moment of satisfaction. Another technique, third technique that he lays out, goes back to this idea of the gap. Now, in learning to meditate with breath, one of the things that we can do is find the gap. Find the gap. There's a point where the breath is no longer coming in and it has not yet begun to go out. That's the gap. There's a point where the breath has gone completely out and it has not yet begun to return back in, and that's the gap. So one of the breath techniques of meditation is to be in that gap. Just be in that gap. And of course that gap also represents the gap between your thoughts. A thought comes, it goes, another thought comes, it goes, and in between there's a gap. Can you find that gap? Can you stay in that gap? And this idea of the gap carries over now to periods between sleep and wakefulness. Excuse me. And this, it goes both ways. In the morning when you're waking up, or whenever you're waking up, and at night when you're going to sleep, or whenever you're going to sleep. There's a time, if we use going to sleep as an example, there's a time when you are falling asleep and you are still awake. And then there's a time when you are asleep and you are no longer awake. But there's a gap in between where you are neither awake nor asleep. You're just in that gap. Now, a lot of these techniques, if you look at what the different techniques of meditation and different techniques of spiritual discipline are about, is getting the activity of our thoughts to slow down or to stop. This idea in some cultures of fasting and dehydrating and sleep deprivation and those kind of things, they tear down the defenses of intellect and ego. And the intellect is not working very well anymore. The ego is weak and tired and it wants to go to sleep. And in those moments there's a gap. You see, there's a gap when the real can be experienced. We can experience it every night when we go to bed. We can experience it every morning as we're waking up. Trying to find that gap. try to find that gap and try to be in that gap and try to stay in that gap. And in that period where the intellect and the ego are kind of shut down, but conscious awareness is still there, and you haven't dropped into an unconscious sleep. Conscious awareness is still there. Just experience that conscious awareness. That's what's real. That's the Is-ness. That's the Such-ness. That's the Am-ness. The last technique we've heard a lot of in many different books and talks over the years, and it's consider the world as an illusion. And what Osho points out in this chapter is the illusion doesn't necessarily mean that it's not real. What it means is we can't tell whether it's real or not. We can't tell whether it's real or not. So when you are asleep and you are in a dream, right? So you have dreamless sleep and then you have dreaming sleep. In dreamless sleep, you're not aware. You are there, right? You still are. Where are you? You still are. But you're not aware. You're not aware. Then a dream starts to occur. And you become aware of the dream, but you don't recognize, unless you've been working with that spiritual technique, that spiritual practice, you don't recognize it's a dream. You get caught up in it as if it was a reality. Yeah? If something's chasing you, your heart beats fast. You start to sweat. You may call out for help. You have this experience, but this entire experience is not real. And yet you can't tell that it's not real. That's the idea of what we mean by illusion. Now you come into the waking state. You get up in the morning, the clock goes off, you get dressed, you get ready to go to work, and you think this is real. I know this is real because I'm awake, because I'm not asleep. But is it really real? Or is this just a different level of the dream? You and I cannot take in all of the sensory inputs that are available around us. We select what we see. We select what we take in. So what we're taking in is not necessarily what is there. What we would say, what is real is what is. We're not taking that in. We're selecting, and we're having a selected experience. It's kind of interesting now because they talk about news filters in the internet. You know, you go to the internet now and you search for something, and they're going to give you back what they think you're looking for. Not all the possibilities that are out there, but what they think you're looking for, because their whole point is to try to sell you something, to try to point you to go buy something. Which is difficult if you're trying to do research on a topic, because now you're not getting all of the possible articles about the topic. You're getting the ones they want you to see. So journalists and researchers have to use a means of going to the internet with a blank slate, with a user identity that doesn't have any previous searches attached to it, and that way the results they get back give them a broader range. But that's just a reflection of the way our consciousness actually works, because we're constantly absorbing or taking in information through filters. And that's why we say we can't really tell what is real. It's just an illusion. It's just an illusion. So if we think of the world as just an illusion, that what we're seeing is kind of a projection of ideas and a projection of opinions and a projection of images, and then our interpretation is just more intellectual processing and ideas and interpretation and all those things, we tend to detach from them. We don't get so caught up in them. See? They're not what's real. They're not what's important. And then it's easier for us to say, well, if that's not real, then what is real? And then we have to go back in and say, the observer. So You and I, where our eyes are in our body, we can't see ourselves. We could look down and see our feet or our knees, or stick our hand out and see our hands, but we really can't see all of ourselves unless there's a mirror. And we have to have a mirror to go stand in front of, and then it reflects our image back to us. So what we want to think about then is that what we're experiencing in the world is not reality, but it is a reflection. It is a reflection of human consciousness. And we can't even look into that consciousness and see ourselves because we are almost on the other side of the mirror, on the other side of a two-way mirror. And we are looking through that reflection. So what we want to do is we want to get back. We want to get back to the observer. We want to get back to the one that is real. We want to turn inward. Now, this is not something necessarily that you're going to sit down and in 5 minutes, you're going to have it. It's going to be there. It may take months. It may take months of taking one of these techniques and just practicing and practicing and practicing until you have that glimpse, until you have that kind of, that mystical moment, that glimpse of what is, that glimpse of what is real. And then you want more of that. And then you want to experience it more, and you want to experience it more. Oh, so sometimes we think, well, I don't have time to do all. How am I going to get the time to do all this? Well, it's like anything else worthwhile. You have to have time to exercise. You have to have time to shower. You have to have time to eat. You have to make time. You have to make time for your spiritual practice. Think about when your little body was in your mother's womb. You've ever seen pictures of the human fetus as it develops? There's a period in time where the books that I remember, the science books, they had a picture of a tadpole side by side with a human being, and they look almost identical. Almost identical. You can't tell which is a tadpole and which is the human being. There was a time when this body that you're using looked like a tadpole. Where were you? Where were you then? Not in the head. There was no head. You see, but you were. You were. Despite the appearances today that you are in a body, there was a time that you were, and the body as you know it didn't exist. Where were you? See? Where were you? In some of Zen Buddhism, they have koans, which are kind of like an unsolvable problem that they give the students to think on, because in thinking of this unsolvable problem, it kind of puts the intellect into a loop where it gets stuck, and then reality can come through. It reminds me of the Star Trek, the original series, when they gave the computer an unsolvable problem. The computer had some kind of a virus that was destroying the ship, or always destroying the ship, I guess. And they gave the computer an unsolvable problem, like calculate pi to its final position. And the computer got locked up trying to solve the unsolvable problem. And then the bad things that it was doing stopped. So the koan kind of puts us into that state. And one of the koans is, what did your face look like before you were born? What did your face look like before you were born? Where were you? Where were you when your little body looked like a tadpole? The very life that breathed itself into the nostrils of the clayman, that is the reality. That is the impermanence. That is what you wish to experience. You don't want to know about it. You don't want to analyze it. You don't want to label it. You don't want to describe the paths to get to it. You want to take the path. You want to experience it. Turn inward toward the real. Everything else is illusion. And so it is.